Hola, hola, hola a todos. Soy Tasha de Tasha Teaches Spanish y tú estás mirando a otro episodio de Hablamos Español. Gracias y bienvenido. Hey, everybody, this is Tasha of Tasha Teaches Spanish, and you're watching another episode of Hablamos Español, or We Speak Spanish. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time viewing a video, or even if it's not, if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit the like button, leave comments. What you hear at the beginning of every YouTube video that I get tired of hearing, that's what I need you to do, por favor, if you have interest in continuing to see these interviews that I take pleasure and am honored to do. To hear so many people's life experiences. So go ahead and handle that for me, por favor. But if this is your first time, gracias por venir y bienvenido. um, how well, I guess I need to start at the beginning. This program exists to shine a light on those who are contributing to the diversification of foreign language learning. So it doesn't just have to be Spanish, but that's what I know. So that's what I wanted to talk about. But overall, I specifically want to talk to those Afroamericanos, because oftentimes we don't see ourselves in foreign language learning spaces. So the world doesn't think we know or care to learn other languages, but then we don't think we know or care to learn other languages. And so hopefully you are inspired. You don't have to learn Spanish, just learn something else, even a little bit of it. Not everybody's trying to be fluent. I get it. In your mind, it's a burden. I get it. But just a little bit of something else won't kill you, and know that you can do it. So let me shut up. Oi, today we have with us Christian Cox. Hey, Christian.
Hey.
Thank you so much for taking out your time to do this interview with me. Thanks to Brennan Baldwin for connecting the two of us. I really appreciate that. And Brennan Baldwin, Mr. What, 30, 30 countries in 30 days, or Mr. Around the World. I
Yeah,
forget what I called him.
something
But
like that. 30
feel
countries
free to
before 30, I think he did.
30, Mr. 30 before 30, or something like that. Yeah. So feel free to go and watch that interview from last year. But nevertheless, I have Christian with me today. So we're going to start the interview like we do siempre, always, with Christian's introduction. This gives the opportunity for you, the viewer, to test out your Espanol. Christian and I are going to be talking in Espanol. So this gives you a chance to see what you know, see what you don't know, what did you catch, what was difficult. And then at the end, al fin, we'll do the same introduction in English. All right, so vámonos. Christian, ¿de dónde es, perdón?
Nací en New Jersey, pero me crié en Arizona, así que cuando la gente me pregunta, por lo general digo que soy de Arizona, allá es donde aprendí las cosas más importantes de la adolescencia, manejar, qué sé yo, fui ahí a la high school y todo eso, así que sí, diría que soy de Arizona.
Ok, ¿y estás en Arizona ahora?
No, en realidad ahora vivo en Orlando, en la Florida.
Donde hay mucho sol, hace mucho sol.
Sí, sí.
Ok, perfecto. ¿Cuándo mudaste de Nueva Jersey a Arizona?
A los 12 años.
Ok, ok,
Sí, sí.
en más o menos los adolescentes, los años de adolescencia.
Sí, sí.
Sí. Ok, muy bien. ¿Qué haces, Cristian? ¿Qué es tu trabajo o son tus trabajos?
Yo trabajo en la tecnología, trabajo en una empresa en la parte de que, bueno, nuestra función principal sería apoyar todas las operaciones del negocio con diferentes plataformas, aplicaciones y cosas por el estilo.
Oh, tú siempre vas a tener un trabajo porque la tecnología es el presente y el futuro.
Claro, claro.
Muy bien. Y por eso tú decidiste tener este tipo de trabajo, porque es
Y en
algo
realidad,
seguro.
no, en realidad me pasó por casualidad. No, o sea, yo estudié español en la universidad, pero había estado viviendo en Buenos Aires hace varios años atrás y para tratar de quedarme allá necesité trabajo, así que cuando terminé de estudiar empecé a postularme a diferentes trabajos y justamente una empresa chiquita de tecnología me contactó y ahí
Ujú.
me quedé. Por suerte me terminó gustando, así que desde los 22 años que me recibí, estoy trabajando en este rubro.
Ok, y perdón, ¿y la compañía estaba en Argentina o está en Argentina?
Claro, sí, sí, sí.
Ok. Entonces, y ¿por qué mencionaste a Argentina? He escuchado que el acento argentino es uno de los más difíciles entender a veces de otras personas. Y tú tienes un acento muy distinto. ¿Es el acento argentino?
Claro,
Ok.
o sea, hay un par de cosas que son, digamos, muy características del acento de Argentina, o al menos el acento de Buenos Aires. Em, Se pronuncia diferente la doble L y la Y.
Con
Ah,
doble, ok,
la-
doble L suena como
claro, claro, cuando vos decís la palabra chicken en español, por lo general la gente acá va a aprender a decir pollo, eh, pero en Argentina se dice pollo. Claro,
en mi opinión suena como la J de inglés o J.
claro, sí,
Eso
sí,
es lo
sí,
que yo escucho.
sí,
Ok,
sí.
entonces, el doble L, ¿qué más?
Y
Es
la Y,
diferente.
entonces, la Y, entonces digo, yo me llamo Cristian.
Llamo. Ok.
Claro,
Ok. Muy
claro.
bien. Tengo una estudiante que habla con personas de Argentina por su negocio y
Mm,
ella frecuentemente me dice, Tasha, es tan difícil entender ellos, ¿no? Y ella habla y entiende muy bien el español, pero
claro,
siempre me dice eso y ahora puedo entender mejor.
claro.
Ok. Y yo estaba en España por 9 meses, más o
Ok,
menos. Y la única cosa yo recuerdo que es distinto de su acento es el uso de la lengua,
claro,
pero
claro,
nunca adapté esto. No.
claro, claro.
¿Por cuánto tiempo estabas en Argentina?
6 años.
Eres
Oh.
nativo. 6 años, ay.
Sí, sí, pasé la mayoría de mis 20 allá. Me
Ok.
fui teniendo 22 años, 21 años y ya yendo para los 22.
Uh,
Y me volví en el 2018 a Estados Unidos. Así que hace 2 años y medio que ya volví. Pero sí, pasé muchos años allá y aprendí de todo, 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 todo.
wow, qué bueno, qué bonito. Ok, continuamos. Solo hay 3 preguntas más.
Ok.
Sus pasatiempos, ¿qué haces en tu tiempo libre?
Bueno, me gusta, ahora quizás es un poco más complicado, pero me gusta jugar al fútbol, que yo crecí jugando al fútbol.
Y
Em,
es fútbol latino, de Latinoamérica.
claro,
Ok.
sí, sí, sí. Crecí jugando al fútbol, es algo que nada, me encanta desde que soy chiquito. También me gusta bailar, bailo salsa. De hecho,
Uh,
bailando salsa conocí a mi esposa. Y bueno,
oh, qué bonito.
sí, es un pasatiempo que compartimos. Obviamente ahora por el COVID es medio complicado salir a bailar, pero bueno, eso y nada, me encanta la música, escuchar música y eh, nada, eso, ¿viste?
Ok, qué bonito. ¿Y ella es de Argentina también?
Claro, sí, sí.
Uh, ok, has mencionado tu familia o tu esposa, pero díganos de tu familia, hermanos, padre, madre o niños o
Sí,
cualquier cosa.
sí, bueno, nosotros somos tres. Tenemos una hija que ahora va a cumplir 9 meses.
Perdón, ¿ella cumplió qué?
Ella va a cumplir 9 meses ahora en el
Ok,
mes que viene.
joven, un bebé, una bebé.
Sí. Después de eso tengo varios hermanos y bueno, mis papás, ¿viste? Pero ellos todos viven en Arizona. eh, y bueno, acá estamos nosotros, ¿viste? Y de hecho, no muy lejos de acá, donde vivimos nosotros, vive mi prima. así que tenemos familiares por acá, por la zona, pero sí estamos un poco dispersos, pero nos tratamos de juntar cuando podamos, ¿viste?
Ujú. Ok, y perdón, ¿cuántos hermanos tienes?
Somos cuatro en total.
Ok, ok, muy bien. La última pregunta, pues, es un poco de como dos preguntas. ¿Tu canción favorita latina o en español y él o la cantante favorita de Latinoamérica?
Me mataste.
Ok, ok, uno.
Em, Creo que lógicamente sería un tema de salsa. Em, wow. Em, bueno, hay una canción que me gusta mucho de salsa que
Ok,
se llama Timba para la Humanidad.
ok, un
Es de un grupo
momentico. Timba
pa
para la
la,
humanidad. Aquí está.
es un grupo que se llama Timbalay.
Ajá, aquí está. ¿Ellos son de dónde?
Creo que son
¿Cuál
de
país?
Miami, pero son de esa especie de miamenses cubanos.
Ay, sí, los pioneros de la salsa, como pues este grupo en mi mente. Ok, muy bien.
Sí, sí.
Ok, y esta es la canción favorita, ¿sí?
Y es una de las miles de canciones que me encantan.
Ok, una, perdón. Ok,
Sí, sí, sí,
y
sí.
necesito escuchar y aprender de esta canción. Nunca he escuchado de la canción o el grupo. Ok, ahora uno de los cantantes favoritos de
Cantante
Latinoamérica.
favorito. Eh, hmm, eh, wow, estoy un poco desactualizado, pero eh, bueno, me gusta. Bueno, en realidad, a ver, es que en el último tiempo escuchaba más que nada salsa, pero en los primeros años que yo empecé a escuchar y practicar entrenando el oído con la música, me acuerdo que uno de los artistas que me había gustado en ese momento había sido Luis Fonsi.
¿Quién?
Luis Fonsi,
Oh, voy a Google. Luis Fonsi. Aquí está.
sí.
De, no sé, no dice. Puerto Rico, un
Sí.
puertorriqueño.
Después está
Ok.
Víctor Manuel, que también es puertorriqueño, que canta salsa. Eh,
Víctor Manuel. Aquí está, con dos L's. Aprendiendo mucho. Nunca he escuchado de estas personas. Nunca. Ok, Luis Fonsi y Víctor Manuel. Gracias, ok. Y tengo una canción nueva a aprender, Timba para la Humanidad.
sí, esa te la recomiendo mucho. Es muy buena.
Ujú, perfecto. Gracias. Y es el fin. Oh, no, quiero hablar de una cosa más,
Ok.
porque para mi cliente, quien tiene negocio en Argentina, yo un día busqué para canciones argentinas y aprendí de una mujer, una banda y Diego Torres. Y por eso aprendí la canción Color Esperanza. Entonces, cuando pienso de Argentina, pienso de Color Esperanza. ¿Conoces esta canción o no?
No, no la conozco.
Pinta, como decir, pintarse la cara,
A
color
ver,
esperanza, bla, bla, de
ahora lo voy a buscar.
algo con los ojos, con el corazón.
Colores de Esperanza.
Color
Colores.
Esperanza,
Ah, de Diego
Diego
Torres.
Torres.
Ahora después lo voy a
Pintarse
tener que
la
buscar.
cara. Pero está
Ah,
bien, ahora tú tienes,
salió este último. Ah, no, salió hace un montón de tiempo. Sí, bueno, lo voy a tener que buscar.
sí, es una canción vieja. Pero ahora tú tienes una canción nueva.
Sí,
Y
sí,
es
sí.
de Argentina. Ok, el fin. All right, so to you, the viewer, hopefully you were able to catch quite a bit of our conversation and what it meant, and etc. And if not, stick around because we're going to clear it up at the end. All right. But that was really nice, Christian. I learned a lot of great nuggets, and so I'll be sliding some of those questions in or some of those points in while I ask questions. And matter of fact, let's just start with why, and viewer, you're getting some of the info, so you don't have to guess now about the introduction. What made you go to Buenos Aires in the first place? And definitely, why did you? Okay, this is three questions. Sorry. What made you go? Why did you stay 6 years? And well, I guess you already really answered that. But anyway, what made you stay 6 years? And how did you adapt? You know, some people when they go abroad for a month is too much, or a
Yeah.
year. And like I'm going back home. So all the three of those, starting with what made you go to Buenos Aires in the first place?
So my story is kind of like I think it represents the story of most people when they study foreign language in high school. Most people will do it for 2 years. I decided to do it for all 4 years of high school just because I really enjoyed it. Um, but then you get to a point where it's kind of like, you study for 4 years and you know enough to kind of get around. But obviously, if you don't practice it, you're going to lose it, right? And so after I graduated
Mm-hmm.
high school, I started at the community college and I wanted to continue Spanish, but the community college offered essentially what I saw my freshman year of high school. So that kind of was going to be super counterproductive. I ended up studying it either way for the credits, but as far as kind of advancing in Spanish language was concerned, um, it was kind of I thought it was going to be taking a step back. So I at that time I was just like, I really want to learn like for real how to speak. Um, so I ended up going into a lot of like online language exchange forums, talking to a lot of people who were trying to learn English. And at that time, a lot of the people that I ended up speaking to were from Argentina. And so that was when I started to really kind of like, I guess, find myself within the language. Because you can learn like a pretty solid base here in the States, right? But, teachers are going to teach you a mix of most of the Central American countries and maybe a little bit of Spain. But mostly it's going to be based off of Central America and maybe Mexico. But still, you know, you don't have this kind of like identity to it, and that's another facet of language learning, right? It's not just the words; it's the culture behind it, the way the people live, the expressions that exist in one country that, even though it's the same language in another country, it's not the same. It's a ton of different things other than just a word. So when I started to talk to these folks from Argentina, um, I started to incorporate things based on how they speak, um, and essentially it was kind of like this mini adoption of just me gravitating more towards that. I ended up going to Spain for a semester to study, but by the time I went to Spain, I was already so influenced heavily by Argentina that eventually I was just like, I gotta go. So after my semester in Spain, um, that was the end of 2012. I went home for a month and then I flew back. I flew to Argentina in early 2013, and kind of the rest is history.
That is really nice. And I'm sure you adapting to the language and culture ultimately, I guess, helped connect you to the language, got you closer to the language. I imagine because that's what I at least tell clients, and not everybody's there, especially in the beginning stages. But I've noticed, at least for me, once I was ready to go higher, it helped me to connect with Cuba. Like I just end up liking Cuba because of Celia Cruz, and then there are Afro Latinos, and then they're just finding something to where I could see myself
Yeah,
within that culture made me feel closer to the language ultimately. So I get that. That's a good point. That's a good
yeah.
point.
I think particularly one of the things that drew me to Argentina was, the culture is very particular in the sense that um, unlike other Latin American countries, like so generally speaking, in Latin America, the culture is more kind of warm and welcoming than what might be social norms here in the States. But my family's from the Caribbean, and in our family, we grew up, hugging, kissing each other, that type of thing. And so when you go into a country like Argentina, you talk to your friends and they talk like this close to you, right? And you hug each other, and you have a friend and you tell your friend you love him, you hug and you kiss your friend and stuff like that. So it was something that was for me really easy to adapt to because that was the way that I was raised in my house, and amongst my family members and extended family members.
Mm.
So, for me in that sense, it was kind of easy to draw towards that. And they're also kind of just like super laid back about everything. Um, so it's kind of it's easy to, or at least it was easy for me to you know, incorporate myself into that. And obviously by the time I got there, I had already, began to be influenced by the way they speak. And so I got there and I was like, oh, everybody is speaking the way that I've been learning to speak, right?
Feel kind of at
Whereas,
home.
exactly. Whereas, when I studied Spanish all through high school, but I didn't really practice that much in the street or anything like that. And obviously, any time, especially being from the Southwest, most of what I was going to hear, most of what you hear in the Southwest is, Mexican Spanish.
Correct.
So um, when I would speak, obviously, it's very different from what you would hear, um, which is why when I finally got to Argentina, I was like, okay, everybody is talking like I do, or at least I'm talking like everybody is talking, So that was another uh, factor for me that kind of helped me solidify that was where, um, I wanted to at least stay for what I thought was going to be initially at least 1 year.
Good. That is a great segue into my second question. Why 6 years? What happened?
So essentially, when I first got there, so I studied at Arizona State University. Um, I ended up studying my last 2 years of my undergrad through their online program, which essentially allowed me to be wherever I wanted. That's how I ended up being in Argentina, and still studying my undergrad through ASU. Um, and actually, my plan was, okay, let me just finish my undergrad, so I'll stay down here for 2 years. Um, when I finish my undergrad, then I'll see what I'm gonna do. If I find work down here, I'll stay. If not, then I'll go back to Arizona. Um, so when graduation came around, I flew home. This was December 2014. I flew home, and I had already been previously applying for jobs in Buenos Aires, and one of them called me while I was at home. Um, so that's kind of what ended up taking me down there indefinitely, because what I was going to do was I had a round trip ticket to go back to BA,
Mhm.
while I was in the States, doing graduation and everything. And I think I was just going to give myself like another 6 months to see what happened, um, and then just buy a one way to go back to Arizona. But thankfully that call came, and I was able to get that job and kind of just have my foot in the door somewhere. And that kind of was the first. That was the first kind of like major turning point that took me into my third year down there. And by the time I was 3 years in, getting between, just getting professional experience, then you become a little bit more marketable. I went to a different company after that. I also then ended up studying a master's program.
Ooh.
And so that was, another part of me staying down there. And then
Excuse
also,
me. So at this point, because you said undergrad was ASU, so at this
yeah,
point you went to the master's program that was in by an Argentinian university.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
At,
can you
at,
talk
at the
about that? I mean, it's so many jewels to get from you, Christian. I'm sorry to
at
keep
the at the
diverging,
at
but can you talk about, because I would be nervous to go to school, and I guess people do it all the time, but for me, just living abroad was like I jumped a lot of hurdles to do that much. Now I have to go to school. Ay ay ay. So were there even like legally? Was there a lot of extra documentation needed for you to go? People in different countries do education differently. So give me your thoughts there. I guess talking about the entry process and
Yeah.
then differences. And we don't have to stay there too long, but I just want to know.
Not really. I mean, so basically when you go through Argentine immigration, essentially to get your documentation in order, you just have to have a reason as to why you're going to stay in the country for so long. Um, so I ended up getting my first legal residency status through the university. And essentially it was just, I had to get my background check, uh, in Argentina, as well as done by the FBI here, and then I had to get all that apostille. So all my stuff here in the States, I had to get that apostilled and translated and presented it in the university down there. Um, but after that, it was kind of just smooth sailing like normal. Go to the university, go to your class, you have your classmates. I think that was one of my most important learning experiences because my program was about the economic bloc around there. So Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay. I can't remember. I don't know if I'm missing one, but essentially it's the equivalent to NAFTA down there.
And I'm
But
sorry, I don't even know what NAFTA is, dear.
that's
Is that a trade
our
agreement?
that's the yeah that's a trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Thank you.
So it's the equivalent to the lower half of South America, is what I studied. Um, and it just opened my eyes up to so many things that I had no idea about. Economic policies in Argentina, Brazil, and the other countries. And then also it helped me to expand on my proficiency in Spanish language too, because again, going back to the language being more than just words, there's different ways of speaking, depending on the context that you're in, right? If I'm talking to friends, I'm going to speak in a different way than when I go to the university and we're having a more formal discussion. So I mean,
In Argentina, do they use vos, correct,
yeah,
instead of tu?
yeah, yeah,
Vos.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, always. So, and usted is like reserved for super formal.
Is
Um,
that what you would use at the university?
yeah, so between the teachers and like between me and my classmates would say boss, but like to the teacher we would say usted. The teacher would also say usted back to us. Um, but yeah, after that, like if you go back and hang out with your friends or whatever, or if you go to the store and you talk to a clerk, it's always boss. If you talk to someone who's older, obviously it's usted, but they'll tell you no, just say boss. um, but yeah, it's like it's reserved for more so formal um, context.
Okay, that was good. Thank you, thank you. And now differences in the way in which they carry out instruction versus our university system. And just a few. Like I said, this I don't want to take too long, but this
Um,
is really interesting.
what do you mean by like an example?
So
What
the
would be
class,
an
just
example of what
even
you
okay.
mean by?
So in the U.S., most universities, have the kind of same structure. You go in, you listen to your lecture, you leave, you take some notes, you take a test, the end. Each professor is different and
Yeah,
operates a little differently, but comparing your undergraduate studies and the way in which those classes occurred, of course when you were in person, not the 2 years online,
yeah,
and then comparing your in-person experience abroad and in university, was those differences. That makes sense now? Is that clear?
yeah. It was similar for the most part. You go and you get to class. The teacher shows up. They have their lesson plan. They go through it. You know, um, very similar. If you have questions, raise your hand, ask. The class will debate or whatever. Um, yeah, for the most part, it was really similar. Um,
Okay.
I think and obviously it depends on the teaching style of each professor, but at least from what I saw in personal experience, there was more um, like debate amongst the classmates. But I think that also has to do with with we're
Uh-oh,
studying,
having a little
right?
connection
So
trouble.
I'm a
Excuse
Politician
me,
by
Christian.
nature.
Excuse me, Christian. We were a little
Yeah,
disconnected. You said there was something amongst the students. I missed that. Excuse me.
yeah. I was saying I think in my experience, um, it seemed like there was more debate amongst the students. But I also feel like it has a lot to do with particularly what I was studying. Typically in economic policies, there's always going to be it's going to have that dynamic of more debate by by nature, just because of it's what it is. There's tons of
Mm-hmm.
economic theories that people speak about and debate about. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, for the most part, I think it was pretty similar to what you'd see here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah,
It makes me say, man, maybe I should have gone to school abroad while I was there studying something. That never crossed my mind, but I love that idea because that's even different to me than study abroad. It sounds a little more in depth and integral. So, I mean, you literally are studying abroad, but I never studied abroad. I just went through for a job in Spain, but how it sounds,
okay.
I don't know. They don't make it sound as deep, I guess, because it's for a shorter period of time. Because you went the whole, I guess, what, 2 years for the whole master's program?
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds deeper, sounds
Um,
better.
it's also really enriching because it's one of those things where me as an American sitting in on those types of classes where they're obviously going to teach everything based on the way Argentinian society had lived through history,
Mm,
and
yeah.
you get to see from the outside the role that the U.S. played in a lot of how the development of different economies um, in different countries kind of form themselves around the U.S. And those are things that as Americans, when we study here in our universities, we don't really get the opportunity to see it that way. So when you look at it from the perspective of someone from another country, even if you were to study in Spain, right, you would get that Spanish perspective of saying, this is where we were as Spaniards, working with North America, right? So it's kind of really enriching in that sense too, because you get to see the other way around.
That is really good. And I don't know the history of Argentina or Spain as far as economically with the U.S. But I will say this to your point: me learning about other cultures, especially in Latino America, but even just through the world, it does make me see why a lot of people don't like the U.S. Because of the business deals. And like I said, I don't know
Yeah.
if the U.S. did some bad things, but it was like, oh, this is why people hate Americans. Okay, I get it. Okay,
Hmm.
so I don't think that's what you were saying, but I see the connection when you see it from
More
somebody
or
else's
less,
side because of course. Go
there's a
ahead.
connection. Definitely, there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Because of course, when we're hearing it in school, it's always we did this, we helped. No, it wasn't. It wasn't help in their
Yeah,
opinion. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, sir. That's good. That's good. Good stuff, Christian. We haven't even. When it was a third question, I asked you, what made you go to Buenos Aires? Why 6 years? Adaptation. Was it difficult to adapt,
Yeah.
especially for 6 years? But I feel like you already touched on it when you said you already were practicing the way in which they speak. So I imagine that helped. But anything you want to just say on the adaptation? Did you get a little 2 year itch? Like I think I'm going back to the U.S. Because I think you did mention you went back home and then they called you for the job, but that's why
Yeah,
you went back. If I got that right. So just the adaptation,
yeah.
if you want to comment on that.
I think what I was getting at is my biggest one of the things that was most frustrating to me was just a difference in like efficiencies in the day to day compared to the way things work here in the States. Um, but I've always just been kind of like super laid back and flexible. Um, and it's one of those things where I was continuing to learn. So like by the time I was 3 years in was really when I started to learn. what it's really like to live as Argentinian working class. And at that point, I'm just in the day to day, and um, a hiccup in the road. Okay, well, that's how this works out here. Get on with it and just keep doing your thing. Um, to me, it was just so normal after a while, because the years passed, and by the in the blink of an eye, I was there 3 years and 4 years and 5 years. And it's just like it was just normal to me, after a while.
Mhm.
I think for me too, the other thing that's a huge reality for me is, I left the States when I was 21 and some change. So I was super young, and I was still like um, malleable in that sense, right? So it's just like
Mm.
whatever I was gonna live through was just, what I was gonna learn, and that was just gonna become normal for me.
Yeah. You weren't too old and too rigid yet.
Um, which, yeah, exactly. I wasn't, all that much. I really didn't. I wasn't like stuck in my ways because I had no way to be stuck in. Like I was still just learning about just, growing up in general. So a lot of that to me was just like, whatever, it's normal. Just kind of adapting to it in that sense. I didn't really have my first formal job until I lived out there. I had only been a student,
Mm.
full time. So I
Yeah.
didn't really my first years, as an adult, like for real, trying to get by were out there.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because as you were talking about the fact that it took the third year for it to hit, the fact that once you got the
Hmm.
job, it started to hit. I was thinking to myself, that sounds like regular adulthood even for me. Once I got my
Yep.
first real job at maybe 25. My first job that wasn't connected to a college. And how old am I? I'm 28.
Okay.
No, that's the wrong year. I'm sorry. That's the wrong age. Because it's 2021. Maybe 22, 23, not 25. So, and even then, going from that university student mindset to, hey, nobody cares about your degree or what you did in college. They want you to prove something at the job. So that for me was a transition, even in my own, native
Exactly.
country. So I imagine it, and what you're saying, it sounds really similar. Just adapting, period. The transition
Exactly.
from student to grown person.
Hmm.
Okay, I got you. That's good. We haven't even really started on any of the questions that I have slated, but that's fine because everybody has a different story, and I like to shine a light on that. So, not even going to the list of questions yet. I'm also curious to know, and viewer, you're getting a free answer here from the intro. You said you met your wife through salsa in Argentina. So, which
Yeah.
year was that of your 6 years there, and I guess how did you all end up where you are now? You
Yeah.
don't have to give me, a whole movie or anything, but just I guess the main points.
No, yeah, yeah. So we met in 2015. Basically, we had both been dancing at the same uh, dance academy,
Hmm.
um, and that academy would put on like annual shows that different groups would do, just like dance a
So excuse
choreography
me,
that they
stop.
would
So
never
excuse
put
me, stop
on.
right there. Stop right there, Christian. So you weren't just going to El Clube, the salsa club. You were getting real instruction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah, we like are obsessed. Yeah, so it's like that's something that we like really enjoy. So we've taken like we've done more or less formal training, nothing super crazy, but um, definitely probably a little more advanced than your typical Friday night basic, lesson. Um, we've gone through different workshops of, very specifics of like Afro-Cuban dances that are outside of just salsa. Um, but yeah, we met each other in this dance academy, and she actually belonged to a different group within the academy, and I belonged to kind of a different group, but you always cross paths. Um, and there's friendships that overlap between different groups, and you meet people like that. So that's kind of how we met. We got married in 2016, and
Y'all got
this was kind
married
of like,
in Argentina. Do I have that
yeah,
right?
that's a whole nother crazy story because my family
Yeah,
flew
you
out
just
there.
keep giving me questions to ask. Like now, I want to know that. But okay, one thing at a
Yeah.
time.
My family flew out for that. That was a blast. It was, oh my goodness.
So, and to
Um,
clarify, it was a year after knowing each other. You all met in 2015. You got married
yeah,
in 2016. A year of
yeah,
knowing each other.
about a year and a half after we started dating, we got married. Um, and like this is kind of part of my transition back to the States because um, like I said, it's one of those things where you read about it in the newspaper, but it's hard to really for it to really materialize in the mind of someone who doesn't live through it, where you read about things like hyperinflation and not being able to buy like basic things, right? And that's very real in Latin America. It even becomes more real when you get married and you think about having a family and having kids.
And you can,
um,
and especially since you're an economics guy. Number one,
mhm,
define. I'm not even gonna say for the viewers, for Tasha, what hyperinflation is, just so I can know what I
mhm.
think I'm hearing, and what does that look like there?
Yeah,
Like, if bread is $10, like, so number one definition, please, and then I guess just an
yeah.
example of what you were starting to see there.
Yeah, so my basic like my basic understanding of hyperinflation is literally just the value of your currency um, going down in a very rapid way. Um, a healthy economy is going to experience some sort of inflation at a super slow rate. So if you look at the States, a good example of that is when our parents went to college, it was cheaper um, than what it costs for us to go to college these days.
Yes,
But
sir.
the jump from maybe a $500 semester to um, $5,000 semester happens over a stretch of a long period of time, not from
Yes, sir.
one year to the next. So that's
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 why
kind of
it's
what
hyper. That's why
hyperinflation.
it's hyper because it's accelerated.
Exactly,
Not that inflation won't happen,
exactly,
but that shooting up is the issue.
exactly.
Hmm.
So what that looks like in real life in Argentina, and I'll give you a very specific example that happened to me once, is when I flew home for graduation, I stayed for a month. My shuttle to the airport cost me, just to throw an arbitrary number, let's say it cost me 500 pesos, which I don't remember what the change to the dollar
Conversion
is
is.
at that time.
Mhm.
But let's just say it cost me 5 to the airport when I left Argentina. And I go back a month later, the same trip to get back to my apartment cost me 700, and only 30 days had passed.
Wait
Yeah.
a minute.
So that's like a real life example where and these days people are you go to the grocery store to buy groceries, um, and the next month you probably have to leave a few things out of your basket. And
Mm.
another component of hyperinflation is the rate at which things become more expensive is much faster than the rate at which your salary and your income grows as well. So that's
That's what I was
also
just
another
going to
factor.
ask. I was just
Yeah,
going to ask, like, meanwhile, while prices are spiking, people aren't making more to balance that out.
exactly, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly.
Hmm.
So
Man,
that was
do
real. That
you
was very
happen
real.
to
Yeah.
know? Uh-oh, excuse me. Do you happen to know who? I guess just the Argentinian government just says we're gonna start this today. The end. Just is that who determines this?
I mean, there's a lot of moving parts as to
Okay.
why things are the way they are out there. Um, and to me, it's. I mean, it's another conversation. Um,
Oh, let me not try to get
but
an economics
there's
class out of this.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, we can for the purpose of this show, it's probably it might bore the audience, but to me, it was always something interesting. We can can definitely catch up offline if you want to on another
Yes,
day.
sir. Yes, I'm just
But there's a ton of
because to me
moving parts there.
that all goes into the experience. Because, like you said, that's why you started leaving, want to saying, "Hey, let me go back to the U.S." So it started really
Yeah,
intriguing me because I'm like, okay, that's all tying into your story. But yeah, I get it. It can. I guess if we dig
yeah,
too deep, it could get boring. But okay, so
yeah,
hyperinflation is what made you say, "I'm gonna head back."
yeah. Just that, and it's difficult to have like to try and have a long-term plan and work towards long-term project. You don't get that you do out here. So, and it becomes more of a real thing, like I said, where, the point in which, I got married and, we began to think about a future and family and, things like that. Obviously, when you got another mouth to feed, there's a lot of things that you take into
Mhm.
consideration and, it's just real life at that point, right? And so that was kind of like the beginning of us looking at, the possibility of coming to the States and all of that. Um, so yeah, from there it was just like we got married in 2016 and mid in April 2018 we were back here. So we ended up living out there for another year and a half. Um, and yeah, we've been back for now, or I've been back. She's been here with me for 2.5 years now.
So how is because you said you had family go out there, so I'm assuming you all had a wedding.
Yeah.
So how is an Argentinian? How does an Argentinian wedding differ from a United States one?
So I would say they're way much more fun. There's like no limit. Basically, when you rent out a venue, it's yours for like the whole day much. Whereas here in the States, you get, a very strict schedule. You got the reception from this time to this time, then you got the party from this time to this time. You guys, don't got to go home, but you got to get out of here. Our ceremony started at like 9 o'clock, and we went till something like 7 in the morning. So they
Oh
start
my
later.
gosh, who needs a
Everything starts later
club?
out
You
there.
have a wedding to go to. My
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, yeah. So we had a blast. It was such a great night. Yeah, it was super fun.
It's
Um,
nice. I've heard that
and
about other
everything is,
cultures.
unless you get married and yeah, 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 they know how to party and have a good time.
Okay. And you were gonna say something. I'm sorry. I guess we had a technology issue. Unless you're getting
Um,
married, something.
yeah, I was gonna say unless you get married in the church, the reception and the party is all at the same place. So like you literally just show up and you're there for the whole evening, night,
Mm,
and early morning.
gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, we had a blast. It was so fun.
It sounds nice. It sounds nice. Another thought that came to mind that is not on the list of questions. Your favorite, and it's probably more than one. So some of your favorites Argentinian dishes, foods.
Wow. So Argentina is known for their steak, first and foremost. So, and this is another conversation that we can get into, but I actually never got into eating steak until I moved out there. One, because eating steak here in the States is typically more expensive than your average dish. Two, because and I always give my mom a hard time about this. She always cooks steak super well done. Um,
Oh,
the
no
thing about
thanks.
steak is the more you
But that's a lot. That's a lot of
exactly the
African
more you
Americans. It's not
cook
just
it,
her.
yeah, the more you cook it, your steak, obviously the tougher it becomes, and actually you cook the nutrients out of it and you cook the taste out of it. Our Argentinian, um, their cattle are raised on pure flatland, so their steak is more tender because the cows aren't walking up and down hills and developing muscles that make the meat
Mm,
tougher. So, for one, the steak is very tender. Two, they don't put any sauces or anything like that on it. It's just salt, and they cook it over over embers from coal rather than directly on the flame. So it's a slow cook, and it's not, like you would see in a typical steakhouse here. So you don't get that kind of like burnt charcoal taste on the outside. It's just like buttery. Like, oh my God, it's an
Mm.
art out there. Out there, it's an art. It's different. Um, I would definitely say my favorite dish is one of my favorite dishes is gonna be definitely a good steak. They do it typically with like mashed potatoes or a salad. And then there's, the reality about Argentinian cuisine is also, Argentina, um, and also Uruguay, which is, right across the river. That region of South America had a very large influx of Italian immigration, um, which is
Okay.
why a lot of their cuisine is like heavily influenced by Italy. So if you've ever gone to an Italian restaurant or even a place like Olive Garden where you see on the menu something that's called like Milanese, which is essentially just breaded chicken with tomato sauce and cheese on top of it. In Argentina, they call that milanesa. Um,
Mm.
so people will that's like a very typical dish. You can go into any Argentinian restaurant and get a milanesa with French fries or mashed potatoes or what have you. That is still to this day one of our go-tos in our house. Um, it can either be milanesa de pollo or milanesa de carne. Um, but yeah, that and then there's a ton of really good dishes. I would say definitely a good steak, and they also have this sandwich that they call choripan. So it's literally chorizo, like a big one of the big sausages. Y pan, chorizo y pan, choripan. Um, and so that's another like classic at the asado where you go and there's a bunch of meat on the grill. Um, yeah, there's a ton of really
You could
good
go on and
dishes.
on. That gives me some
Yeah,
starting points. That gives me some starting points. I don't think we have an Argentinian place in Arkansas. We have a lot of Mexican joints, and we have another culture's cuisine, one or two. So but anyway, just gives me a good idea if I come across a place while traveling in the U.S., an Argentinian restaurant.
yeah,
Um, gives me a good idea. And of course, I mean, who doesn't want to hear about food? So, and I have heard great things about their
yeah,
steak. But thank you for breaking down the cooking process and even the cultivation process of the animal to break down why it's so great.
yeah,
That was good.
yeah.
That was good.
Hmm.
Well, we are going to wrap up, but um, I cannot not ask this question before we get into your English introduction and stop. From my understanding, a lot of Latin America has Afro Latinos and African influence. But from my understanding,
Yeah,
Argentina does not. It's one of the, I don't know, I don't want to say few, but one where it's like really no, you don't see much of yourself, or if you do, you're just an immigrant as well. So you can confirm that, and then just talk about your experience being melanated and how that went.
yeah. Um, it's actually interesting that you say that, and it's probably odd. What I'm gonna say is I actually felt more comfortable in my black skin there than I did here in the States, even though I saw represented.
Wow, that's
The reason I say
amazing.
that is because the reason I say that is because in my personal experience and from what I've seen, with other black friends that I had out there is um, because of such a small percentage of the population being black. Um, Argentinians are super curious to learn about us and engage in dialogue with what our background is like, where we're from, what our families are like. Um, I've had so many conversations with people just genuinely just wanting to know more about me. And um, that's something that here in the States, I can't say that I had happened to me, where people would like just ask me. so, tell me about, your background. Where's your family from? What kind of food do you guys eat? What's your guys' culture like? Just like genuine, innocent curiosity of just wanting to know more about the person, and also like a lot of Argentinians are like, oh, you guys, you have so much flavor, and the way you dance is so amazing. Literally, I've had conversations with people, kind of like, looking from the outside in, just like appreciating Black culture, whether it be American Black or like even African influences or Caribbean African influences, um, and engaging in conversations like that made me feel like, wow, like there are people of other cultures who they look at us and they think we're like exotic, and they're interested and intrigued, and they literally just want to ask questions and find out about me. I've had so many interesting conversations, um, about that, and so that was one of the reasons that I felt super, comfortable in my skin out
And
there.
and I imagine, Christian, and this is more of an ask. That's why I say I imagine you can deny it or negate it if it's off. Because there a lot of European Americans here that we've grown up with, I've gotten that, they want to know about our hair or stuff, but it comes with an undertone of not appreciation, or an undertone of assumption, or an undertone of stereotypes. And you're saying you didn't get that. It was just pure education for them versus like, don't you all do this? Or don't you all do that? I think
Yeah,
that's how I'm hearing it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The reality out there is, Black people represent a very small percentage of the population. So when Caucasian folk out there have a chance to, meet a Black person who somehow has become a part of their circle, they are, very interested to just learn, like ask you questions based on their curiosity of what our community is like. Um, those were a lot of the questions and a lot of the conversations that I had. Um, and the tone behind it is just like innocent curiosity. Like, can you just
Mhm.
tell me more? Like that was what I got. That was the vibe that I got from 90% plus of the conversation that I had with people asking me things like that. Even people when they ask me about hair, they're like, "Yo, but like, so when you wash your hair, is it like, does it get super soaked?" But like, they just want to know, like, because they never had the opportunity, to have those kind of conversations.
Mhm.
Um, and like even with my wife, when she's learning about some of the products that Black people will use in our hair and stuff, and she's just like, "Oh my God, like that's so cool!" Like when we were first getting to know each other, she's like, and like she's like, super Black thing. Like I actually got my pick right here. And so like when I'm picking my hair out and like she's seeing me doing it for the first time, she's like, "That's so cool how like your hair can stand up and stuff like that." And it's just like for them, it's just like because they when you literally don't have any perception of what something is like, and you get the opportunity to interact with it for the first time, you kind of just you soak it up and you're just like, wow. So a lot of my conversations with people that I met were like that. I've seen something similar. I've seen people express something similar when they go to Asian countries, where they I've seen I've seen and I've heard that you go to Asian countries, even if you're white, um, just someone from the Western world, you go there and they're staring at you just because they're like in awe. They're like, "Oh my goodness, this person is so different." And if they have the opportunity to talk to you, they're gonna ask you so many questions just because they want to know, like they want to learn about this person who is so different from them that you typically would not see as often in their society. But it comes more from a place of innocence and curiosity.
That's really nice, and that's a really good perspective on it. Yeah, that was good, Christian. Thank you. Gracias. Um, I keep thinking of questions I want to ask, but we got to wrap up. So maybe we can do a part two.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, definitely.
But as we wrap up, let's go ahead and do your conclusion in English. So I'm going to ask those same questions. And viewer,
Okay.
you probably know most of the answers now, because we dug into some of those things. So, Christian, where are you originally from?
So I was born in Jersey, but I moved to Arizona when I was 12. So I tend to typically say I'm from Arizona. That's where I did high school. Um, I learned how to drive and all that. So my adolescent years were definitely from Arizona. So I definitely feel like I'm more from AZ.
Okay. Your job or jobs? What do you do?
I work in technology. I work at a company in their technology group, and basically, my team and I we work to support the business operations with different enhancements of platforms and applications that essentially just support the business.
Okay. What do you do in your free time? Or at least before coronavirus, I guess.
Before COVID, and frankly, before my daughter was born, we would go out and dance quite often. We I also really enjoy listening to music. I used to play. I grew up playing soccer, so I would before COVID I would play in a men's league. Haven't been back. I played a few pickups here and there with friends. Excuse me, on it fiercely. But yeah, those are kind of like my main hobbies. Playing soccer, um, listening to music, dance, and salsa.
Okay, good, nice variety. Everything's physical. Well, it minus to listen to music. I guess it is, but
Yeah.
anyway, the other two involve movement, physical movement. So
Hmm.
you like to get out and move your body. Okay.
Yeah.
You already mentioned your daughter, so tell us a bit about your family.
So it's three of us. It's my wife, myself, and our little daughter. She's going to be 9 months here at the end of January. Other than that, I have three brothers and sisters. My parents, they live in Arizona. So we're kind of spread out, all across the states. I've got cousins who live here, cousins who live in New York, um, family that lives in Atlanta. Um, but yeah, we try and get together every now and then. But yeah.
Oh, and that's something I asked you. Said here. I end up asking you in during the Spanish portion. Are you currently in Arizona? And your answer was,
Oh no, we live in Florida, in Orlando.
okay, muy bien. The last two questions. Your favorite song in Spanish, and one of them, because you were mentioning there were so many, I think. And then one of the favorite singers.
Yeah. So one of my favorite songs, salsa music, the one I gave to you was "Timba para la Humanidad" by Timba Live. And then one of my favorite artists kind of goes back to the first days where I started to listen to Spanish music, or music in Spanish, and trying to improve my listening skills. Luis Fonsi, also, I think I mentioned to you another person there.
Victor Manuel.
Oh, yeah, Victor Manuel is also a salsa artist from Puerto Rico. But yeah, the list goes on. There's a ton of them. Like, there's so much really good music. Um, I listened to I listened to a lot of Shakira early on as well because her singing style is different. So,
Is
like
she from? Is
you
she
know,
from Argentina?
no, she's Colombian. Um,
Thanks.
but her voice is unique, and the way she sings can kind of um, be a challenge. Like if you're learning to listen to Spanish music, the way she sings can kind of make it more challenging to understand the words. So that was something that I like. Also, I thought some of her songs from years back were really really good. So I listened to a few of my favorites by her. Um, but yeah, there's I got a bunch of playlists from back in the day, and my Spotify playlist is like all salsa too.
That's good. Christian, this has been great. We've had some technological issues and other things that required your patience, but you've been a wonderful person to interview. And thank you again for your time. You have such a deep story. I feel like I could be wrong. Well, I think I am wrong, but I'll put it this way. You're one of the few people that's been on this program that said they lived abroad for 6 years. Like you made a life. It's different than getting a little taste of the culture. You were the culture for us. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's great. That is great. I like that.
Yeah. And like, yeah, it's like I feel like I'm half Argentinian, half
That's what I said earlier.
American.
You're a native. In my mind,
Even at
6 years.
even at home we speak in Spanish, so I don't know. It's just like normal life now.
And that accent is still thick. And of course, because your wife's there and she's Argentinian. But yeah, I see it. I see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Thank you, viewer or viewers, for your time. And once again, like, subscribe, etc. So you can continue to see more of these interviews. And thanks so much. Hasta luego, Christian.
Thanks. Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.